Hello, my name is Paul Heron, and today we're going to have a look at iteration. By the end of this lesson, learners will be able to explain the purpose of iteration. So what are loops? What are they for? We'll be comparing the three types of loops used in Java, which are the while loop, the do-while loop, and the for loop. We'll be looking very closely then at the for loop. We'll be implementing the for loop. And by the end of the session, you will be able to design, build, and explain a program in a paired programming context with one of your peers. The program will use a for loop to capture user input from the console, enter them into an array, and then write the array values to the console. Now I'll show you how to do some of that, and the rest you'll have to figure out for yourselves. We often need to do more or less the same thing multiple times on a computer. Now, one way of doing that would be just to repeat the same code over and over again. But a much neater and better way to do that is by using iteration or loops. And again, the three types of loops we'll be looking at are the while loop, the do-while loop, and the for loop. Now, in each of these loops, we decide whether we want to go round the loop again using a Boolean comparator. Okay, so in a while loop, we check a condition to see if it's true or not before going into the loop. If the condition is true at the start of the loop, then we go ahead and do the code inside the loop, and then we check again to see if we want to go around the loop again. With the while loop, the condition is checked at the beginning of every iteration. The loop may not be entered into at all if the condition is false. The do-while loop is similar to the while loop, except we always do the code inside the loop at least once. And then we check at the end of the loop to see whether we want to do the loop again. So code in a do-while loop is always carried out at least once, and the condition is checked at the end of every iteration. Now, a for loop is different. A for loop uses a counter. So we have to be able to know or ascertain prior to going into the loop how many times we want to loop around the code. There are a number of elements in a for loop statement. The first one we need to create is the counter variable. We have a Boolean condition, that's our comparator, the same as the while and the do-while loop. We need to compare to decide whether we want to do the loop again. And then we have in our for loops, we have an increment expression. So that means that our counter, which we declare at the start of the for loop, has to be incremented for the next time we go around the loop. Now, variables declared in a for loop are only in scope within the loop. Now, here's our syntax. Just a wee minute ago, I mentioned that we had a counter variable, a Boolean condition, and an increment expression. And here's the actual syntax of a for loop in Java. We declare our for statement, which is a reserved word, and then brackets. And inside these brackets, we set up the control for our for loop. First of all, we initialize our variable. So we declare a variable called I, which is an integer, and we set it to the value 0, just to start with. So we assign the value 0 to the integer I at setup time. Before going into the loop then, we compare I with a certain value. In this case, I've used the value 11. You can use whatever value is appropriate. And then we have our incrementer, which doesn't happen. Nothing gets incremented just yet. The first thing that happens is that the system will go and implement the code inside these brackets. If this part of the statement is true, it will implement the code inside the brackets. And what we're saying in here, this is very simple. It'll just print out the string count is, and then the value of I. Then it'll come back up to the loop again, and this time the first thing that will happen is that the incrementer will increment the variable I. So this time round it'll be 1, the second time round. That gets compared with 11. It's still less than 11, so this is true. And then we go back into this part of the code, and we run this command again. System.out.println count is, and this time it'll be 1. Sorry, I think I said a second ago it would be 1. It would be 0 the first time, 1 the second time round. And we do this, we go around this loop 10 times while I is less than 11, and it will print out the number for I each time. When we come round on the 11th occasion, I is now equal to 11. It's not less than 11 anymore, so this line of code won't be run, and the system will just drop down into the next line of code that you have in your program. Now, what we're going to do is have a look to see how a for loop is implemented in code. I'm going to set up an array, and the array will have, say, 5 elements. Then I will iterate across the array and assign values to each of those 5 elements using the array counter to help us do that. And then I use a second for loop to print out the contents of the array. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up our array. So array of integers, I'll call it my array. It's new, and I'll give it 5 elements. And now set up the loop. So for, and I said int I equals 0. So we start I at 0. And we use 0. We tend to use 0 because arrays and so on, various structures tend to be 0 based. So the first element of the array is accessed by using the number 0. So it makes sense then to have our for loops starting at 0. The only thing is you have to remember then that we have to end, if we have an array of 10 characters, then we go from 0 to 9, not 0 to 10 in our counter. Otherwise we get an out of bounds exception, which wouldn't be good. So then we want our I to be less than 5, because it's, beg your pardon, all thumbs today, I less than 5. And then we have our incrementer, I plus plus. And then we want the body of our for loop. Okay, so my array, so it's the ith element of the array, and we'll give that, rather than just making it I, let's make it 20 minus I. Just to add a little bit of complication. Okay, so what will happen now in this loop is that we have our I set up here at 0, and while I is less than 5, when that is true, then we go on into the body of the for loop, and we will assign a number to the array element. So the first time round, we'll assign, we will on the 0th element of the array, we'll assign 20 minus 0. The second time round, we'll be on the second element of the array. Sorry, well, yes, it'll be number 1, but it'll be the second element of the array, and that will be 20 minus 1 this time, which will be 19, and so on. So rather than me typing the for loop again, I will just copy and paste. Put a wee space in there just to make it easier to see. And this time we'll put a print line. And we will just put in our my array I. That ought to do it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just run this and see if it works, and then I'll step through the code using the debugger. Okay, so you can see on the right hand side of the screen that we've got our numbers 20, 19, 18, 17, 16. Okay, so I'll just put the debugger on and we'll go through one of these for loops just so you can see that working. So to use the debugger, I click on debug on the top right hand corner of the screen, and then to start the debugger, if I push the normal play button or the normal run button, the system will just zip through the code. It won't really debug properly. We won't be able to see anything. So I need to put a breakpoint on the code, and I do that by clicking on this blue area to the left of the code. Now, to start the debugger, there's a couple of options for that. I can click on Run and go down to Debug. But if you see here, F11 does the same job for me. And then I would also use my F keys to step through the code. This is step over and step into. The difference between step into and step over is that step into will step into, if you call if you call a function or a method from another method, then if you do step into, it'll go into the other method. If you step over, then it'll just do a call to the called method without actually stepping into the called method's code. Okay, so I'm going to click my F11 key to start this off, and you can see the debugger stops at this line where I had the breakpoint. Up in the top right hand corner of the screen, we can start to see values being assigned to various variables. So I click through, and I'm going to use the F5 key to click through. Okay, so my array is now set up here. If I click here, there are 5 elements to my array, and they all default to the value 0. I'm going to start iterating around this for loop now. So again, clicking the F5 key. My I is 0, 20 minus I. So my array, if we look up here again to the right, this first element will be changed to 20. And come back up to the back up to the array again. This time, the first thing that will happen will be that the I will be changed to a 2. Beg your pardon, to a 1, from a 0 to a 1. The comparison is made here between the I, between the 1 and the 5. This is true because I is still less than 5. So now we go into the code in the for loop, and we assign, at this time it'll be 19 up here on the right hand side. There we go, 19. And if I go around that loop another 3 times, and now we have we set all our array elements? Not quite. One more to go. So we'll do another one. Oh, there we go. The last one's done, so it's 16. And now we jump out of this loop, because at this point, this will no longer have been true. Okay, and I won't iterate through the second for loop because it'll just do the same thing again. But that's how you would use the debugger to step through code. Run that again, and we can see our results coming out here are 20 to 16. Okay, so we've had a look at how to do coding of a fairly simple for loop. I have uploaded that code now onto the Edmodo website. So I'd like you to download that code. I'd like you to modify the code to capture numbers from the console and assign those numbers that are captured from the console to an array of length 5. And then I'd like you to write those numbers out to the console. Then I would like you to modify the code so instead of containing integers, the array contains strings. If you're not sure how to do that, use a Google search to research if you can't figure it out for yourself. Once you have it working, I would like you to show and explain your code to one of your classmates, one of your peers. I'd like them to review the code for you using the I've uploaded some rules on some rubrics or some code review rules to the website. So have a look at that and use those to review each other's codes. Then I would like you to upload your code file to the Edmodo site. And then I would like you to answer the quiz questions for this lesson. Okay, so just to recap, we've had a look at the purpose of iterations. It's for repeating lines of code over and over. We've compared the 3 types of loops. The while loop, which you do a Boolean check before going into the loop. A do while loop, where you do your Boolean check at the end of the loop. And a for loop, where you know or can ascertain before going into the loop how many times you're going to be able to, how many times you actually need to iterate. We've looked at the syntax of a for loop. Then we've actually implemented a for loop. And now it's over to you to go and extend what we've just done. Thank you very much for listening to this. And look, go and do your coding, get your hands dirty on code, enjoy doing it. Thank you very much.